when a man sitting on a bench outside the Save-A-Lot grocery store in Marlinton, West Virginia, heard a small voice, very small, maybe 4 or 5 years old, coming from around the corner of the building saying, 911. Then you say the address. What's the address? 14 Bird Lane. Say it. Say the whole thing. And then a second voice, even smaller, said, 911, 14 Bird Lane. Someone is hurting my brother. And the first voice said, no, not hurting. Say, someone is hurt and we need help at 14 Bird Lane. Don't say hurting. Don't say who. Just say someone is hurt. They come faster if you don't explain. Just the address and someone is hurt. Say it again. The man stood up from the bench and walked around the corner and found 2 kids sitting on the curb behind the store. A boy, maybe 11, and a girl, maybe 4, and the girl was holding a toy phone, a pink plastic thing with big buttons and a smiley face, and she was pressing the buttons in order, 911, and reciting the words her brother had taught her, and the boy was coaching her the way you'd coach a kid learning the alphabet, except the alphabet was an emergency script and the lesson was survival. The man said, "What are you 2 practicing?" And the boy looked at him and said, without hesitation, without embarrassment, without any of the shame a kid usually has when an adult catches them doing something private, "I'm teaching my sister to call 911. She can't read yet, so she can't read a phone screen, but she can press 911 because I taught her the buttons, and she can say the address because I made her memorize it, and she can say, someone is hurt, because that's the sentence that gets the ambulance. I taught her this because somebody in our house has to know how to make the call, and I'm not always there when it happens." Not a game. Not pretend. An 11-year-old boy had built a 911 training program for his 4-year-old sister, using a toy phone and repetition, and a script designed to get emergency services to their house as fast as possible. He'd thought about every word. Don't say hurting. Don't explain who. Just the address and the fact. He'd optimized a 911 call the way an engineer optimizes a system. Remove the friction, reduce the variables, give the dispatcher what they need, and nothing they don't. The Save-A-Lot sat on Route 219 in Marlinton, Pocahontas County, population 1,100, a town that called itself the gateway to the cranberry wilderness and had more trees than people. The parking lot had maybe 20 spots, and the bench out front was where old-timers sat and watched traffic pass, which on a Tuesday afternoon in Marlinton meant watching about 6 trucks and a mail carrier. Deacon Raines was on that bench because his truck was in the shop across the street getting a tie rod replaced, and the mechanic said 2 hours, and the Save-A-Lot bench was the only place to sit that didn't cost coffee money. He was 43 years old, 6 feet 0 inches, 256 pounds, with a black beard and hands that had been doing timber framing for 19 years, cutting, notching, and raising the kind of post and beam structures that held up barns and churches and the occasional rich person's cabin in the mountains. He was vice president of the Pocahontas Ridge MC, a 7-member club based out of Marlinton that met at a members' barn on Route 28 and rode the Highland roads when the weather held. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels and hit that notification bell, because this story starts with a toy phone behind a grocery store and a 4-year-old who could dial 911 before she could spell her own name. Deacon walked around the corner. The boy, dark hair, thin, wearing a camo jacket 2 sizes too big, was sitting on the curb with his legs crossed and his sister between his knees, facing out, holding the toy phone. The girl had brown hair in 2 braids that were coming undone, and she wore a pink coat with a broken zipper held together with a safety pin. She was small, the way hungry small kids are small, not tiny by nature, but tiny by circumstance. "What's your name?" "I'm Hagen. She's Birdie. She's 4. I'm 11. "Hagen, why does Birdie need to call 911? because I'm at school from 8 to 3, and she's home with him, and if something happens during school hours, she's the only one who can call. Mom can't always call. Sometimes Mom can't get to the phone. So Birdie calls. That's her job. I gave her a job because she's 4, and 4-year-olds need to feel useful, and this is the most useful thing she can do. Who's him? Dale. Our mom's boyfriend. He lives with us. He moved in last year. He's not always bad. Some days he's fine. Some days he takes us to the creek and throws rocks with Birdie, and it's normal. But other days he drinks, and when he drinks, it goes bad. And when it goes bad, Mom is the one who gets the worst of it. And I used to be there for all of it. But now I'm at school, and Birdie's the only one home during the day, because she's not in school yet. She starts kindergarten in the fall, and I can't be there to protect Mom between 8 and 3, so I built the next best thing. You built a system. I built a system. Birdie is the system. She's the alarm. She's the phone. She's the 911 caller. She's 4 years old, and she's the emergency plan for our entire house. And I hate that, but it's what I've got. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Asphalt Angels, because an 11-year-old boy had turned his 4-year-old sister into a first responder because nobody else in the house could be. How long have you been teaching her? 3 months, since January. It took 2 weeks to get her to press the right buttons in the right order. 911. She kept pressing 919, then 991. I made her do it 100 times. I sat with her on the floor in our room, and I said the numbers, and she pressed the buttons, and we did it until she didn't get it wrong anymore. Then I taught her the address. That took a month. 4-year-olds can't remember addresses. I broke it into a song. 14 Bird Lane. 14 Bird Lane. I sang it to the tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. She learned it in a week after that. Now she sings it in her sleep. Mom asked why Birdie sings the address in her sleep, and I said she was playing a game, and Mom believed it. Does your mom know you're teaching her this? Mom knows something is wrong. She knows I worry, but she doesn't know I've turned Birdie into a 911 operator. If she knew, I don't know. She'd either be grateful or she'd be ashamed, and I don't want to find out which one, because both of those mean she knows how bad it is, and right now she's pretending it's not that bad. If she admits it's bad enough for a 4-year-old to have a 911 script, she has to admit it's bad enough to leave, and she's not ready to leave, so I don't tell her. I let Birdie practice behind the grocery store, and I let Mom pretend. If you're watching this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and helps these stories reach the people who need them. Now, back to the story. What happens when Dale gets bad? He yells first, then he throws things, not at people, at walls, cups, plates, a remote once. Then he goes quiet, and the quiet is worse than the yelling, because the quiet is when he focuses. When he's yelling, he's everywhere. When he's quiet, he's looking at Mom, and only Mom, and his voice gets low and flat, and that's when it gets bad for her. I've seen it, not the worst of it. She makes me take Birdie to our room when it starts. She says, "Hagen, take your sister." And I take Birdie and I close the door, and we sit on the floor, and I put my hands over Birdie's ears, and I hold her. And during school hours? During school hours, Birdie's alone with it. Not alone. Mom's there. But Mom's the one it's happening to. She can't call and be hurt at the same time. That's the math. Someone has to make the call, and it can't be Mom. Before Birdie learned, nobody called during the day. I'd come home from school, and I'd see it. The aftermath. The chair moved. A dish broken. Mom in the bathroom with the door closed. And I'd know it happened while I was at school, and nobody called because there was nobody to call. Birdie fixes that. Birdie is 4, and she can't read, and she can't write, and she can't reach the top shelf, but she can press 911 and say 14 Bird Lane, and that makes her the most important person in our house between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Has she ever had to make a real call? Hagen was quiet. He looked at Bertie, who was still pressing buttons on the toy phone, singing the address softly under her breath. 14 Bird Lane, 14 Bird Lane. Once, February, I was at school. Mom called me after, I have a phone, a flip phone, for emergencies. And she said, Bertie called. She said Dale had started, and Bertie walked to the kitchen, picked up the real phone, pressed the numbers, and said the words, the exact words. Someone is hurt. 14 Bird Lane. The dispatcher said, Honey, how old are you? And Bertie said, 4. My brother taught me. The deputy was there in 7 minutes. Dale was gone. He leaves when he hears sirens. He always leaves. Mom had a mark on her arm, and Bertie was sitting on the kitchen floor, holding the phone in her lap, waiting for me to come home from school. She did it. She did it perfect. 911, address, script, no wasted words. She did it at 4 years old, and she did it better than most adults. And when I got home from school that day, she was sitting on the floor, and she looked at me and she said, Hagen, I did the buttons right. And I said, You did the buttons perfect, Bertie. And she said, Can we practice again tomorrow? And I said yes, because the call worked, but Dale came back 3 days later, and the system has to keep running. If Asphalt Angels has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. Now, back to the ending. Deacon called 911. This is Deacon Rains. I'm at the Save-A-Lot on Route 219 in Marlinton. There are 2 children behind the building, an 11-year-old boy named Hagen and a 4-year-old girl named Bertie. The boy has been training his sister to call 911 because there's domestic violence in their home. The mother's boyfriend, first name Dale, is the aggressor. The 4-year-old has already made a real 911 call. Address is 14 Bird Lane, Marlinton. I need a deputy and CPS at this location. He texted the Pocahontas Ridge MC group chat. Save-A-Lot on 219 Marlinton. 11-year-old teaching his 4-year-old sister to dial 911 with a toy phone because their mom's boyfriend goes after their mom. The 4-year-old already made 1 real call. Need brothers. 3 brothers arrived, Poe, Slade, and Kern. Poe was a logger, 6 feet 3 inches, 275, all shoulders and silence. Slade was an electrician who always carried candy in his truck. He kept a bag of dum-dums in the glove box for his own kids, and he pulled it out and offered one to Bertie. She took a grape one and held it in one hand and held the toy phone in the other and sat on Hagen's lap on the curb. Kern, 38, a fence builder, the newest patch in the club, crouched down to Hagen's level. You built this? I built this. At 11. Somebody had to. Yeah. Kern looked at the toy phone in Bertie's hand. Somebody had to. But it shouldn't have been you. A Pocahontas County deputy arrived, a woman named Sheets, who'd responded to the February call. She recognized the address before Deacon finished giving it. 14 Bird Lane. I've been there. The little girl, she's the one who called? That's her. With the toy phone. Deputy Sheets looked at Bertie. Bertie was eating the dum-dum and pressing toy phone buttons. 911. 911. Muscle memory. The kid could do it in her sleep. She probably did. CPS caseworker Pam Groves arrived from Marlinton, a tall woman who'd been doing child welfare in Pocahontas County for 11 years. She sat with Hagen on the curb while Bertie sat on Poe's knee, the 275-pound logger holding a 4-year-old with a toy phone and a lollipop, and neither of them seemed to mind. Pam went to 14 Bird Lane. She came back 40 minutes later. The mother, Lee Sims, 29, is home. She has a fading mark on her forearm consistent with a prior incident. Dale Akers, 33, is not present. He's at work at the gas station in Durban. The house shows signs of intermittent disturbance: a patched drywall hole in the hallway, a kitchen chair with a repaired leg. The children's bedroom is upstairs, clean, 2 beds, a toy box. The toy phone Birdie uses for practice has a matching real phone in the kitchen, a landline. The girl can reach it by standing on a step stool that Hagen placed next to the counter. He positioned the stool. He positioned the phone. He built the entire system around a 4-year-old's height and reach. The step stool. An 11-year-old had measured his sister's reach, placed a step stool next to the kitchen counter, and made sure the landline was within her range when she stood on it. The system wasn't just words and numbers. It was infrastructure. Physical infrastructure designed for a child who couldn't read, couldn't reach, and couldn't be anything other than exactly what her brother had made her: the last line of defense in a house where the adults had failed. Pam also found something in the children's bedroom. Under Hagen's pillow, a folded piece of paper. On it, in Hagen's handwriting, was a list. 1. Take Birdie to our room. 2. Close door. 3. Hands over her ears. 4. If it gets loud, go to step 6. 5. Wait for it to stop. 6. Send Birdie downstairs with phone instructions. 7. Birdie calls. 8. Stay in room until sirens. An 8-step protocol. Written out and kept under a pillow. Memorized probably, but written down anyway. Because good systems have documentation. He'd learned that from somewhere. Or he'd invented it from necessity, which is the same thing. Dale Akers was arrested at his workplace that afternoon. Prior incidents on record: the February call, a separate noise complaint in December, a protective order filed and then dropped by Lee in November. The pattern was documented. The arrest stuck. Lee was connected with a DV advocate named Carol through the Pocahontas County Family Resource Center. Carol specialized in safety planning, not the kind Hagen had built with a toy phone and a step stool, but the kind that involves legal protection and relocation and the sustained courage to not let someone come back. The kids went to their grandmother's house that night. Lee's mother, Pauline Sims, 58, a retired school bus driver in Durban, 20 minutes away. Pauline had a 3-bedroom house with a landline in the kitchen and a landline in the hallway and a cell phone on the nightstand. Hagen counted them when he walked in. 3 phones. 3 phones, he said. 3 phones, Pauline said. Birdie doesn't need to call from here. Birdie doesn't need to call from anywhere anymore. That first night, Birdie went to bed at 8. Normal bedtime. She was in a small bed in a room with pink curtains and a stuffed bear and a nightlight. Hagen tucked her in. Not Pauline, not Lee, Hagen. Because tucking Birdie in was his job and had been his job for as long as he could remember, and the job didn't stop just because the address changed. Hagen? Yeah? Do I practice tomorrow? No, Birdie, no more practice. But what if... There's no what if here. Grandma's house doesn't have a Dale. Birdie held the toy phone. She'd brought it. Of course she'd brought it. It was in her backpack next to her stuffed rabbit and a juice box. The toy phone was a tool, and tools were important, and she was 4, and she didn't know yet that tools can become unnecessary. Can I keep the phone? You can keep it, but you don't need it. I know, but I want it. I was good at the buttons. You were the best at the buttons. Birdie put the toy phone on the nightstand next to the bear. She closed her eyes. She fell asleep in 3 minutes. Hagen sat on the floor next to her bed for about 20 minutes, not because she needed watching, because he'd been watching her for a year, and the watching was the only job he knew, and stopping felt like leaving a post unmanned. The Pocahontas Ridge MC started a program called First Call, named for the 4-year-old who made her first 911 call in February from a kitchen floor using a script her brother taught her. The program partnered with local Head Start programs and preschools in Pocahontas and Greenbrier counties to teach every child, not just children in danger, every child, how to dial 911 and say their address. Because if a 4-year-old can learn it from her brother on a curb behind a grocery store, every 4-year-old can learn it in a classroom. The card read, "If a child can teach a child to call 911, the adults have already failed. Be the adult who makes the call unnecessary." 6 months later, Hagen was in 6th grade. He was sleeping through the night for the first time in over a year. No 2 a.m. listening for sounds downstairs, no calculating whether Dale was home or gone, no running scenarios in his head about what was happening in the kitchen while he held Birdie's ears shut. Pauline said Hagen slept like the dead now. 9 hours. Didn't move. Didn't wake. The first time he slept past 7 a.m., Pauline checked on him because she thought something was wrong. Nothing was wrong. Something was right. His body had finally gotten the message that the house was safe, and the night was for sleeping, and nobody needed a protocol. He joined the school's STEM club because his teacher said he thought in systems. Of course he did. He'd built a 911 system out of a toy phone and a step stool. Systems were his language. Birdie started kindergarten in September. She could read now, her name, the alphabet, small words. She could read a phone screen. She didn't need the buttons anymore. But she kept the toy phone in her backpack for the first month of school. Her teacher asked about it, and Birdie said, "It's my emergency phone." The teacher let her keep it. By October, she'd stopped bringing it. She didn't announce it. She just left it on her nightstand one morning and went to school without it. Hagen noticed. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the toy phone on the nightstand and understood that his sister had decided she was safe enough to leave it behind. That was the graduation. Lee completed the DV program and was in a stable apartment in Marlinton. She visited the kids at Pauline's every weekend. The visits were careful, rebuilding. She was trying to be the person who makes the call, not the person who needs someone else to make it. Deacon drove past the Save-A-Lot one afternoon. The bench was empty. The curb behind the store where 2 kids had been practicing 911 calls was just a curb. No toy phone, no little voice singing an address. Just concrete and a dumpster and the back of a grocery store in a small town that didn't know it had a 4-year-old first responder living on Bird Lane. Be the one who hears a child practicing something no child should know and asks what the practice is for. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that when a child teaches a child to call for help, every adult in the room has already failed, please share it. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels for more stories proving that sometimes the bravest person in a house is the smallest one holding the phone. Tell us in the comments, should every child be taught to call 911 before they start school?